Ready?
Hi, and I'm Jill St. James.
And tonight we have a special guest, an author of a best-selling book, James Collier. Welcome to the show, James.
It's a pleasure to be here tonight in the snow. It's coming.
And James, what prompted you to write this book?
Well, the book, Vote Scam, The Stealing of America, it's been a 25-year investigation into how elections are rigged in the United States. Now, I know there's a lot of people out there that are going to take umbrage at that. Elections rigged, because it's our birthright. The birthright of this country is the vote.
Absolutely.
And as a matter of fact, the biggest export of the United States is the vote. We won the Cold War over what? The vote. Haiti, the vote. Everywhere, the vote. So back in 1970, my brother and I were living in Miami, and we were friends with all the liberals of the time, the Tom Haydens and the people like that. And they were pretty much creating chaos in this country for people who understand that era of Nixon, the Vietnam War. And they were saying, you can't run through the system. And so Ken, who is really a terrific historian and a big guy, handsome guy.
Ken's your brother.
Ken's my brother, right? He's not here tonight, but he's my brother. And he said, let's go to New York, and I got an idea for a book called Running Through the System, Ballots Not Bullets, because they're saying the system doesn't work. So we got in our little car and we drove all the way to New York, and we went to see Dell Publishing, cold, right off the streets. And Geraldo Rivera, even, one of the very first interviews that Geraldo Rivera ever had as a kid was me in Grand Central Station, talking about the book, because in one page, Ken wrote this brilliant one-page prospectus on the book, and Dell bought it, gave us a really good advance. And so we went back to Miami, and we did it. Ken ran for Congress against Claude Pepper, who was the father of Social Security, 70 years old, and people hardly ever ran against him. He'd raised $3 million to run unopposed.
And this is with your contract. You had a book
with the contract. So Running Through the System, Ballots Not Bullets was the book. Because and what we did was we said we weren't going to spend a nickel on the campaign. What the poorest guy in this country could spend. And that's what Dell liked that. No advertising, no radio, nothing. And we walked the streets and shook hands, went to houses, spoke at every church breakfast, and did what you're supposed to do. And so on election night, September 7th, 1970, or September 3rd, 1970, at 3 minutes after the polls closed, the CBS affiliate down there called perfect vote percentages for 250 candidates. Well, you can't do anything in 3 minutes. And all of the citizens of Dade County totally asleep, don't care, no one thought about it, you know. But we were doing a book, which we thought was going to end right there. And so when the NBC affiliate down there 20 minutes later not only called the exact same percentages, but added the exact digital vote total that every candidate, including us, was going to get by the end of the night, the investigation went on the next day. So we went to the television station and we got the on-air readouts that you saw on the air.
You really stumbled into this. You weren't looking to find out what's wrong with the system. You know, is it honest? Is it real? You just sort of stumbled on this?
Stumbled on it in pursuit of a good reporter doing a street story of what it's like to run for elections, and we thought it would be over that night and probably would have made a good magazine article. But 25 years later, I'm sitting here talking to you people out there because what we found was the pilot project for the United States. And it's going on right now across America. So everything I'm telling you about Miami, we found in other cities, and other people found in other cities and are finding. And it took 22 years to write the book.
That's a pretty incredible statement, Mr. Collier. I mean, a lot of people believe that, you know, it might happen in one little part of the country or in banana republics, but not in
the United States.
America.
Well, I want to tell you something. I'll get to that later about the computer vote in this country, but we'll get to that. But
I mean, Americans take pride in having, you know, to vote. That's our freedom. That's our right.
And that's what runs this country. And people out there right now are like, say, this guy, it can't be true. It can't be true. But if you go to a June 1995 article of Reader's Digest, anybody can go to the library and get it. Okay. Trevor Armbruster wrote a great report for Reader's Digest saying how many cities and how votes are rigged in all these major cities. Not a newspaper picked up that story. Nothing. Ronnie Duggar, a lot of people know him, one of the top 10 investigators in this country, has written stories about it for the New York Times, in the op-ed pages, how the computer rigs elections in this country. The front pages of the New York Times won't pick up a single word on it. So anyway, back in the 70s...
So back to Dade County.
Dade County at that time, the pilot project we stumbled onto in rummaging through the system, we found out, they said that the League of Women Voters was the people out in the precinct phoning back vote totals. And now that's going on again today. That was part of the project. And we went to the League, and the head of the League, Joyce Diefendorfer, the late Joyce, she's dead now, said, no, we didn't. There was nobody out in any precinct anywhere in this county calling anything back, and I don't want to get caught in this thing. And she started to cry in her living room in Coral Gables with a witness. So we started an FBI report at that point. And in the local newspapers, other than the Miami Herald or the News, who wouldn't touch it, we printed stories about how she said that. And then we went to the computer programmer and said, what's the program that you could use to count it? Because on the readout it said one voting machine was the criteria that they predicted these votes from. Meaning, as soon as someone got the vote, 250 candidates off of one machine, they ran to a phone, called it back to this guy, and they took it on cards. Well, you can't do that in 20 minutes anyway.
Down to the exact number.
Well, you can't even call 250 votes off the back of these lever-style machines, which you have here.
It's physically impossible.
And then go repeat them. That's 500 numbers right there in 20 minutes. They couldn't do it. And the computer programmer, Elton Davis, said, you'll never prove it. Now get out. So we went to the FBI again and said...
Didn't you go to the Attorney General at the time?
No, next. Coming next.
Oh, okay.
You read the book. So that was the reports getting bigger. And people can get whatever we said under FOIA, under my name, James Collier. You can get that report, Freedom of Information, and get all of these reports there. And
so the FBI, that was your next step.
So we proved it. Nobody called back to the station. They couldn't do it in 3 minutes or 20 minutes, and the programmer who supposedly wrote this brilliant computer program to do it based on one machine, and any mathematician out there knows that's an A times B equals C formula, which is A, the vote in the machine, times B, the computer programmer's program equals C, the vote, and you need to know 2 out of 3 in any A times B, and that means you have to rig it, because if you know 2, you did it. So anyway, then through the years, in the first 4 years of the 70s, we went about proving how they did it. Because one thing was to find out, and the other thing was to prove it to the satisfaction of both the FBI and the Organized Crime Bureau in Dade County. And by 1973, we were after the stand-up lever machines, where you open the back of the machine and you read the numbers off.
That's the time we have in
Connecticut,
Absolutely.
Right. And so they shipped all those machines out of town to Marion, South Carolina, or North Carolina, I forgot which that is. And they retrofitted them so that the counters now had raised wheels, raised counters. Instead of flat, it's stuck through so that your 3-digit number was raised like an ink pad, and they put a piece of paper in there called the Print-O-Matic. And that's what you have here now. So this was the pilot project in 1973 in Dade County to test this little system up. And what they said was, we're going to take the keys away from all the precinct captains so you can no longer open the back of the machine and look at the numbers with your eyes to certify the zeros in the morning, and at night certify the numbers on it. Instead, you're going to crank a handle, and there's going to be a roller that goes across this piece of paper, and then you're going to crank it, and a piece of paper is going to come out, and it's going to have the zeros on it in the morning, and then at night you crank it again, and they're going to have the numbers for the final election. So instead of eyeballing it now, you got to trust this magic little piece of paper in the gumball machine. So the first time they used it, it jammed. And about 600 precincts, 4,000 precinct workers walked off the job that day because when they opened the backs, because it jammed, they sent troubleshooters there, the roller hadn't gone all the way across. It wrinkled up the paper. But when they opened it up, there were numbers, zeros in the morning, and the final numbers at night were already in the machine. And that's why 4,000 people quit right there on the spot. And the Miami Herald wrote a story saying there was a big snafu, but they put firemen and policemen on to take their place, but never said why. And so there were the two pilot projects that are now controlling this country, because election rigging is big business. It's a billion-dollar business. They don't leave the running of this country up to the people. It would be much too dangerous for the developers, for the judges, for the sheriffs. You've got to control it. You have to control every aspect, right?
Yeah, so it's controlling who's in power.
Who's in power. And so we went to an attorney. We brought him all this stuff, and he was one of the biggest attorneys in Florida. Ellis Rubin's his name. He was the Watergate burglars attorney, and the FAA guys, Tower guys. Seasoned, yeah. And the press followed him. So he looked at it, and the circuit court appointed him. We didn't pay him or anything. He said, you take all of Collier's stuff, and if it's worth anything, you bring it to us. And he did. So he took it to the state attorney's office. And he goes in and he waives immunity, which means he can be prosecuted. They forced him to do that, trying to intimidate him. If he's lying, he's dying. So we figured we had the Pulitzer there because our champion was going to come out and win this thing. And he comes out and he looks at the camera and he says, Janet Reno has told me to tell you that the statute of limitations has run out on the crime and she refuses to prosecute. And with that, he ran out of the building.
Now, she was the assistant
He was the assistant state attorney
in Florida at the time.
That is correct. And she admitted there was a crime.
Wow.
She lied that there was a statute, and she said she wouldn't prosecute. And that was the first time she obstructed justice, and it's following her to this day.
But your attorney, Ellis Rubin, really knew that you had a case.
Oh, he did, but whatever.
He fought for you, and he went, putting his name on the line.
Yeah, up to that point.
And then something frightened him away.
Whatever was to this day, he's not told us, and we don't have it in the book. We tell the story, of course, but...
And in the book, it's like he's driving off, and you're like running after the car or something.
That's
like,
right.
Wait a second, what do you mean? What did I say to you?
And my brother, what is it? Alice was like stared straight ahead. Right?
I don't want it.
Yes,
I
they traumatized him. Janet Reno traumatized this man. So that was the beginning of the story, and it would have been the end, because the next years. We had to survive, and we didn't know where we were going with this.
What about the FBI? You said that you had
The FBI had all this, right, but the FBI is the investigative branch of the Justice Department. They cannot initiate lawsuits. So in 1972, we went to the Justice Department. This was prior to this, 2 years into the investigation. And we saw a guy named Craig C. Donsanto, who's still there to this day. He was a young man then. He's growing old in the job. And his job is to make sure that vote fraud prosecution on a federal level is never going to take place. He's the stopper in the bottle. And so we went to Craig, and he saw all of this stuff, and of course nothing happened. And that's when we first learned how corrupt the Justice Department is. And that's how Janet Reno is there today, protecting Craig. One of the biggest reasons, and we testified at Janet Reno's confirmation hearing. Oh, we tried to. They wouldn't let us. We testified at Antonin Scalia's, but we'll tell you that at the end of it. Would they let us on that one? And we even sued Scalia. But that's ahead of the story. Anyway, in 1982, the Republican National Committee put out a reward offer saying, we know there is election rigging in the United States, and they put that out through all the newspapers in the United States, Army newspaper, everywhere, saying, we will pay $5,000 for every arrest and conviction you can get of a person tampering with the vote. So we were told that the League of Women Voters, one more time in Dade County, was up in this secret counting office out in the Everglades in a bunker-like 3-story building. And
this is in 1982.
1982, right. Nothing happened between there 74 and 82. It was pretty dormant, except that we got the FOIA files in there and saw that our stuff was all in there. And but in 82,
this is the tape that we
this is the tape you're all about to see, which I'm going to tell you about in a minute.
We were watching it.
It's quite famous tape, as a matter of fact. Pat Robertson paid $2,500 just to show this once on his 700 Club back in 1987. But anyway, we were told that the League was up in this counting chamber in the dark of night in the Everglades there, and nobody could ever get in. You couldn't get past the guards, the dogs, the TV cameras, the Metro cops, the sheriffs, and everybody there, and you had to have ID to get in. Well, that's illegal. Everybody in this country should be able to see how their vote is counted at every step of the way, and that's really what I'm here tonight.
Right. No secrets.
All right, I think they've got... Can we...
oh, here we are.
Turn up the sound on that? Looking at a monitor here.
Yeah. Now, could you narrate it?
This is the League of Women Voters.
Right.
Can you tell us what we're looking at?
Can they put up sound on that?
Thank you, ma'am.
Sound so we can hear what's going on in that monitor?
Thank you. That's all you need. All right. Put it right on my hat, too.
What we're doing is we're getting in the building, and there's the guards there saying that you can't get in. And right here is a sign that says you got to have ID to get in. We got in.
You're following the vote.
Right, we're following the vote cards of the ballot. And what we were told, we would be arrested if we tried to get in this building. We got in. And we're going upstairs. And that guard was calling the security officer, the chief officer. And he's on our tail right now. And this is what no one ever gets to see.
How the vote is coming.
How the vote is coming into this room. And the people to the right there are the League of Women Voters sitting there. And the reason we wanted to get in is we were told that they were punching thousands of holes in the vote card with pencils issued by the election supervisor. And this woman can ask...
League of Women Voters ladies here working tonight?
She points to her right to deflect us. They're really to our left. And so we go...
Explain to us the punching of the holes.
We'll get to it, right? You'll see. Now, this is the room where the votes are supposed to be counted, but they're having a big party, and the mayor's there, and all the judges, and everybody's, all the dignitaries, and you're about to pass the BMX machines, which is the ballot multiplexers, they're called, and they're the IBM cards that you vote on go into these machines. And you can see that machine's empty, and that one's empty, and that one, and that one. And we get to this guy here, and this deck has been counted all night. Now watch, he's going to take a card.
What does it do?
He takes it out and he recounts it. There's a federal offense right there that he did. And the FBI stop-actioned it like that. And he said that card was a phony ballot, the FBI.
Oh, and they just knew that it was a phony ballot.
Yeah, they could see the holes were running the wrong direction in the card.
What happens then? Then what are you doing?
Straighten it out and right.
No problem. Okay. Where are you from? What is your name, sir?
Where are you from?
Joe Malone. Joe Malone?
Yes.
I'm from the Home News, Joe. How are you?
Okay, fine.
Good to see you. You going to be running the BMX cards through the master computer later on?
No,
Well, who's going to be doing that?
that's not the way it works.
Maybe you could show us. We'd certainly like to see.
Well, this is not the time, not during processing. We have ample opportunity before the...
Oh, we would like to follow one of the BMX tapes down into the
I'm going to have to
basement.
ask you to get over on this side.
Certainly. Are you the computer chief of this election
No, I'm
division?
not.
Who is?
Please get over here.
You say you're not. Are you denying what you are, or are you? Are you the computer chief?
What is your name?
My name isn't at issue here. Yours is, sir. What is your position here?
Hold over there.
What is your position?
You want to come on out with me?
Sure. What is your name, sir?
I'm Officer Sapp. I'm sorry, sir. Get out of the BMX room, please.
What is your name, sir? David Leahy, Chief of the Election Division? I'm not under arrest, am I, sir?
No, sir. I'm just escorting you to the door.
All right, let me take a photo of who's escorting. Are you ladies from the League of Women Voters? Have you been paid to be here tonight? Or is your organization being paid?
Why are you punching out holes? This lady's punching out holes. She's punching holes.
Oh, I've got it. Why are you punching holes in that card, madam?
Look at her dress. You can see how many cards she's punched.
Sure.
And she said it didn't go through all the way.
Yeah, who are you? Wait a minute. Don't put your left hand over my camera, pal. Who are you? Get him out. All right, I'm willing to leave. Do you want me arrested or just
Frightening.
You want me removed from the building? Correct. You want me to stop aiming the camera? Come on. I'm going. Okay, I got you. What's your name? What's your badge number? Come on, let's go. Well, you don't need to push. I'm out of the key area. No problem. I'm not violent.
Just looking to find the truth.
Yeah, we later went to Cincinnati and found the league using tweezers to do the same thing there. They tried to stop us there, Judge Niehaus in Cincinnati, and Ken ran the camera with the light off, and he got the league, and then we took it to Channel 9 in Cincinnati, and they ran it, and we went to WCKY Radio there, the Jan Michelson show. He's now on WHO in Des Moines, and we went on the next day on his show at 9 o'clock in the morning, although Jan had never met us, but we told him real quick, and he said, come on, and we'll challenge the election supervisor and the state attorney in Hamilton County. And the election supervisor, Elvira Radford, who had been there for 20 years, resigned the next day. And the Cincinnati Enquirer didn't write a word except to say we were troublemakers. And so that is basically what goes on in this country. And it's going on everywhere.
Why didn't you get any support from the press?
Because we found out that the press is the rigger. And I know that some people are going, oh my God. But you've got, if you play with this long enough, you begin to see who the power sources are.
Catherine Graham now is the owner of the Washington Post.
Right, but she's backed off now. Her son
She
Donnie
also owned, was it
Post Newsweek
in Miami when you were
and
down?
Channel 10. Yeah, right. That night, the first night, the pilot project, when the TV stations were helping in the rigging of the elections, because they were projecting these. Channel 10 didn't go on the air. Catherine Graham kept her station for that year in 1972 from even covering the election. She ran a movie. ABC News that night ran a movie. That was her affiliate, because she knew what was going on and wanted to say we didn't have any part of it, but tacitly admitted it. And that got us involved with Richard Nixon and the Watergate break-in. Stories you wouldn't believe are in the book. Never told stories before. Really exciting.
When you turn this over to the FBI, in your book you mention a part where there's about 37 pages missing that the CIA confiscated. Did you ever find out what happened? Why did the CIA get involved? And this is certainly serious, because the CIA just doesn't jump in an FBI thing for nothing.
That's very true, and the CIA did, because we went to Don Santo with a reporter from Washington, the Washington Times, a Pulitzer Prize winner named Gene Galtz, and we got up to see Don Santo in 1984.
Now he was
he's the guy we went to in '72, he's the stopper in the bottle at the Justice Department that Janet Reno is presently protecting, so that vote rigging across the country never sees the light of day, a prosecution on a federal level. And so I lost my track here. What was
we were back? We were like up to 82, I think.
Right, and we had the video. And that video is what
it was the National Republican Party that
had offered it. Oh, and so anyway, we went to Washington with the video. I'm sorry, And we sued the Republican National Committee because that said in their reward offer they would take us to the Justice Department, and they didn't. They refused. We sued the Justice Department, Don Santo and Williams Brent Smith. We sued ABC News because Tim O'Brien, their chief Supreme Court correspondent you see on Monday nights, saw the video and the evidence and said, hey, this has got to go on the air, and interviewed the RNC, and then he was told he couldn't put it on the air.
From the powers that be.
And we sued the League of Women Voters for lobbying them all to keep it off. So basically that happened, and then one of the strangest things in the book, we print a transcript that showed that the heads of, we said, wouldn't it be great if we could prove, because we did it in Miami, that all the conspirators meet in one room? I mean, to be an investigative reporter and prove that all the conspirators meet in one room is really, you know, you're getting all four aces in a royal flush. So we got a transcript from what's called CSIS, the Center for Strategic and International Studies, which is the big media they quote from. They use that as the pool that they get everybody from when they have a news, they need a news op thing, and they say, quoting this great official. And what we showed was, in the transcript, which we print in the book, the heads of the Republican National Committee and the head of the Democratic National Committee, Katharine Graham, the heads of all three television network news, Roone Arledge and the other heads, Leonard Grossman, the head of
ABC, CBS,
NBC, right? Kirkland, Richard Nixon's guy, I forgot, Melvin Laird, they all met in the same room and decided how America is to be run. And one of the things they say in there is, the press is not here today, we can speak freely. And they're the press, but they don't look at themselves as press. That's where I was, where I lost track. Why the press? The press owns America. And in 1964, they formed a network pool that nobody knows about, or very few, called News Election Services.
Right after Kennedy.
Right after Kennedy was assassinated. And they said, from now on, we don't compete with each other. We will pool all the information, and we'll have a big board, and you will all get the numbers. So when you see Brokaw, Rather, and Jennings get on at 7:01 after the New Hampshire primary and say, we're the first with the most, they should say, look, there's a board at 225 West 34th Street in New York City, and there's a bank of people on the 13th floor of the World Trade Center, and that's a scam that we're pulling, and we're getting all the numbers off the same board, and they're being fed to us by the League of Women Voters nationwide, who we're paying, and Associated Press, which is part of the pool, and CNN and those people. And so we could just have a Pravda head up there giving you the numbers. And anybody can go to that address and prove that that is true.
James, in Florida, are they still using that type of ballot?
They're using the computer ballot, and David Leahy is still there. Should be.
That was a computer ballot down there?
Right.
Okay.
And here they're using the Print-O-Matic.
Well, we have the Print-O-Matic, the lever.
Right.
But I was speaking to the Secretary of State's office the other day, and his assistant was telling me that the Secretary of State is advocating going to a computer ballot.
All right.
And he says there's quite a few out there, and it does leave a paper trail. There's one. But if this gets punched in like that, they can tamper with the ballots.
Yeah, what they do is they want Sequoia Pacific, which is Jamestown, New York. That's who owns the Print-O-Matic that you have now. There was a woman, when the book came out, from Waterloo, Iowa. She had a public access TV show just like this and was on the school board, and she read it, and they had the Print-O-Matic there in Waterloo and through Iowa. And I said, hey, look, go to them and say, you want to look in the back of the machine. You don't want them to just crank it out. You want to open the machine and verify there are zeros on everything and nothing on the piece of paper.
Before the election.
Before the election. And they said, when hell freezes over, lady. And the Waterloo Courier vilified her like you wouldn't believe, and told people not to read the vote scam book, vilified me. And so that what's happened since the book came out is basically people across this country have been saying, you know, we know it's true what you're saying, and we found it before we found your book, and now, you know, we have the book here we can show to people who doubt this is going on.
Right.
But it's like a lady called me the other day, Susan Brenneker. She ran for the council in Jefferson Parish, New Orleans, which is east of the Mississippi, because the other part of New Orleans is west of the Mississippi. And her opponent, or who ran against her, his nephew was the election supervisor. And she was really, you should get her on this show someday. She is like the girl next door. And she is so funny and hip that everybody loved her in town. I just talked to her once, and I realized what kind of, you know, like Doris Day with an attitude a bit. But she's really cool. And the election supervisor, I forgot what she told me, either the night before or the night after the election, put a bullet in his head, the kid. And she lost to the uncle. And so she took a video camera and she went to the warehouse where the computer was stored, and she videotaped, and I can't wait to find out more about how she got in and how she had the chutzpah to do all this. And she punched her own vote, and it voted for her, and she did it again and voted for her, she did it again and again, 4 times, and it voted for her. The 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th voted for her opponent. And she went to other machines, and they all did the same. Pre-programmed. So
to the
computer that you vote on, and you push a button to
and
register.
she tested them, and they were all rigged.
So, and she went to the TV stations with it, and they ran the video. And this was just like last election.
It is true, though. There's quite a number of companies making those.
There's a handful.
Okay.
Not too many.
Are there any safeguards to any of these?
Zero.
Any of these
You can put. We quote experts like Howard Strauss of Princeton University does Election Watch. Believe me, vote rigging in this country is been written about by a lot of other investigative reporters. It's just that you never see it in the mass media,
right.
Except Reader's Digest with Trevor Armbruster's story last June.
Mm-hmm. What do you feel is the best, safest where we can safeguard our vote?
I was going to hold that to the end because everybody said, "What are we going to?" That's all right. I'll tell you now because we'll get to the end anyway. All the major democracies of the world use paper ballots. Israel, India, 270 million voters. Great Britain. Nobody is as dumb and gullible and as asleep as the United States citizens. I mean, I'll bet you that a lot of people turned this off tonight. They didn't want to know from this. They didn't want to know what they're hearing here tonight, and even they're hearing is that can't possibly be.
It's shocking. It
and
really
I'm
is.
saying, you go to your election supervisors in the state of Connecticut tomorrow and say, I want to look in the back of those machines. I want you to show me how the print-o-matic works. I want to be able to open that machine.
Should be your right.
It's your right, absolute right under the Constitution to know every bit of it, how your vote is counted. We should not have a secret count, only a secret ballot. In Oregon, they are voting by mail now. That is the sickest thing I've ever heard. And it's not only it's not a secret ballot anymore. They get to know the names, and they're selling the names of the people who vote, and you can go intimidate somebody. And of course, those ballots, nobody watches who counts them. Nobody even knows who's counting them. They can put out any numbers they want, and they want to go to voting by phone.
That's the key, though, is the counting.
It's got to be done in the precincts, paper ballots, eyed by human beings who care. This country would be so changed if real people got into power, not the people that play ball.
It'd be a government of the people, by the people.
Because this country is manageable. It's just a corporation. That's all we are. We're all running around. Every city, you go into New York City, it's like going to a giant flea market with people living above it. So you're going in, and there's people quite capable of running the economics of the corporation. But the politicians in there now are ripping us off on every single level. There are people on every level that just the germ warfare that you're about to hear about, that's coming. They're going to tell you that people are flying in from Africa bringing you diseases. You heard it here first. They're not. There are things getting out of the laboratory, and there's many top investigators who are writing books on it. I mean, what's the big one now? It's a bestseller. I forgot the name, but people know what it is. It's really, people have to pay attention. It's the savings and loan scandals. Nobody got prosecuted. The Bushes made billions. And they're running for office everywhere, governor of Texas, and nobody prosecutes. They rig elections in order to put judges in. When this lady, Susan Brenneker in New Orleans, went to court, the newspaper wouldn't print a word. The newspaper wouldn't print a word of what the television showed she found. That ought to tell you something.
And you brought this to the court system, though, as well.
Yeah, and so did Susan Brenneker in New Orleans. That's the story I was just telling you about, the woman who videotaped that So anyway, she went to court, she sued, and the judge wouldn't allow her to have expert witnesses on, and he threw the case out immediately. And that happens across the country, and Trevor Armbruster wrote about that in Reader's Digest, too. So it isn't just there, it's everywhere. And people call me every day. This year I'm going to be really busy because people will call me after the next election and say, hey, it was rigged here. Where did I get a good one? I got one from Lizzie Borden's town. That was, what? Massachusetts, Fall River. And it seems like in Fall River they're all Portuguese. And the whole city council was Portuguese. And they weren't going to pass a bond issue up there. This was the last election. $150 million out of the taxpayer's pocket. Nobody wanted it. All the polls showed they didn't. The only people who wanted it was the two brothers who owned the only talk radio show in town and the newspaper. Well, all five lost. All five incumbents lost, and the bond issue passed. And they figured out before the people are done paying, $1 billion will come out of their pockets. And there's nothing anyone can basically do about it unless we can network this thing, unless the people of this country realize what it is I'm telling them. It's big business, it's billion-dollar business running every venue from the smallest city. Well, okay, not small cities, because there's nothing there to steal. But if you can steal, if you can get zoning variances for the big-time developer in town, like in Florida, encroach on the Everglades, wherever you need variances, if you need the judges in, you need the sheriffs in, you need all the constitutional offices in, you need the state attorneys in, the tax collector, people like that. You have to control these offices. Like in the state of Florida, all the constitutional officers are Democrat, and yet the state is going Republican. They control that completely because the Democrat machine still controls that. And I suspect if I investigated this state, we'd find out all that here too. So the major media controls the country. The bankers have their control over the major media because everybody, their paper, their mortgages, their interest loans on the television stations, etc., all of that. So that you have, basically, we're all fodder. The doctors, the lawyers, the clerks, the taxi drivers, us guys here tonight are just fodder in a game of people who are arrogant, nasty, mean people.
And greedy.
Greedy. And they have a big agenda. And right now, Clinton is one of the guys who jamming through that agenda, especially world trade. NAFTA, GATT, taking away the sovereignty of the United States because world trade says that no longer will our intellectual property rights here mean anything. Our patent rights, they'll all be controlled by a foreign group of people, and we'll have one vote on all this, and they can literally rape us, and they're going step by slow step. Everything they're inching along, because these plans were put into place years and years ago. And the think tanks, and people who say it's just a conspiracy theory, let me deal with that for a minute. If the three of us were in a room, two of us would conspire against the third. It happens. It's the American way. Conspiracy theory is not theory. People conspire. And we print transcripts in the book about the conspiring.
Well, this isn't a theory. You have facts.
Yeah, ours is a total fact, but people get together. So
right.
The think tanks that are out there, the big ones in Washington, and the major think tanks of the bankers and the media people get together, and they figured it out that they really don't need people, and they don't need the middle class. Just that the stock market is going up right now. Why? Not because the companies that are selling goods and services are doing so well. They're not doing any different than they did a year ago. they're whacking off hundreds of millions of dollars on salaries of people. And so everything's computer-driven, so that the computers say, "Ooh, look at the profit we got here, man." And so it goes up, and all the boobies out there buy it, and all the people say, "Hey, look at that." They don't check, because their portfolios are going up. But what they're doing is they're just taking middle-class jobs, management jobs, people living in $500,000 houses. I've interviewed a lot of them for the next book. And those jobs are disappearing across this country. You just hear of AT&T, but like I interviewed someone from Maricopa County, Phoenix. I think it's Motorola is there, just laid off 1,000. Beneficial Finance in New Jersey just laid off 80 in one section, 100. You're not hearing. Once downsizing started, I don't know who did it first, but when it started, the corporate executives started saying, "Oh, look at that. That guy's getting a golden parachute, and he made $3-4 million by getting rid of all those middle jobs. Took all their salaries, made it look like a big profit, but they're making the profit on the salary, not on the good and service." And it's a one-time phony issue. But they keep doing it, and every company that goes along say, "Well, we'll just downsize." And the executives who are growing old are taking a big chunk of everybody's salary and voting it into their pocket so they can get out and let the next guy worry about it. But there's nobody in the middle. The middle is going, and they're going to try to use computers to run their jobs so that they don't have to bring them back.
And so easy to do computer fraud.
Exactly. So they're running.
Scam it.
They're getting rid of the middle class. They're controlling the vote on judges, sheriffs, probate. That's a big scam across the country. People die. Certain judges will get the probate, and the referee and the judge make a fortune, and the widow and the children get nothing. Just rip them off. You can't go to the press on it, because the press won't print that story. But that's the Sun Belt is rife with that. California, Florida, just stealing people's inheritances, and you can't go to the press. And the press is the fourth. The press was considered by the people who set up this country as the only safeguard left against a government that will, the Founding Fathers said, do this to you. And the press realized that, yeah, when you say, well, conspiracy, wouldn't someone talk?
Right.
Well,
the people in Miami, the 4,000 who walked off the job, got together, and I write about it in the book, and had meetings and went to the Miami Herald. The Miami Herald said, get out.
I read some history on J.P. Morgan back around the turn of the century. We had I think we had hundreds of independent newspapers at the time, and the bankers got together. They decided, well, we got to control the information in order to control the people, and they started buying up a lot of the independent presses. And
now they're doing
just snowballed. I mean,
they're doing it again. They just passed it yesterday, the Communications Act. It isn't just so that the telephone company and the cable company, that's all they're willing to talk about, can compete and bring down your... What was in the bill, it says that there's no longer a limit on how many radio stations can be owned by one owner in a city. And the only way that authors like myself, and there's many of them, and big authors out there who can get the information out, is talk radio across this country.
Right.
And so if they buy up those stations, all those talk hosts are going to be fired.
Well, thank God we have public access and
so
around
far,
the country.
So far, you have public access.
We have the right to.
And you have underground. There's a fax network.
Right. There's
that people don't know about. A fax network is
shortwave radio, internet. People are talking about this, but it's quietly being talked about. The news isn't picking up. All the major newspapers just gloss right over it. They spend, all their time talking about the Fortune 500 companies, which do the smallest amount of business in this country to begin with. So they're not focusing on what the people have to say, and they're just quieting us down, which is a very frightening thing.
Very true. And if people are only reading the press and the television, they're not getting any idea of what's really running this country. And there's one other little frightening fact I want to get in here. Across the country, there are private companies that come in and run the elections for the election supervisors. The election supervisor who should be in charge and the last person, that's a constitutional officer.
Is this on a county level?
County level.
State level?
County level, right.
Okay.
But they control whole states.
Okay.
They'll go in and cover the whole Midwest, or cover the whole Southeast, like Fiddler and Chambers we write about in there, DFM in California, Triad out of Ohio, and there's more. Then they control the whole states, and they use their software, their programming. The election supervisor stands back, and there's no public bid on this. The public doesn't know it's happening. And if you check here in the state, they're probably here too. Election supervisors are living in million-dollar homes.
How do we find out who that is?
Well, that's the most important part of what I have to say here tonight, is that people have to go to their elections division and say, who counts our vote? Who programs the computer? Here, you have to ask to look in the backs of those machines. I think every single person out there listening tonight should call the election supervisor and say, I want to see how the print-o-matic works, that piece of paper.
And maybe bring a video camera
and bring a video camera and see what you get.
And it's legal. We are allowed to know how this works, what's going on. And aren't we allowed to watch the League of Women Voters doing what they're supposed to be doing?
Exactly. And you should say, I want to see all the bills. I want to see who you're paying and how much you're paying to these people and what you're going to find out, because they found this out in Florida, and I'm working with people in venues that they're not going to answer you. They're going to tell you to get out. And I want to say something. Civil servants should not be able to tell you what you can do.
No,
they're sucking off of your taxpayer dollar. Every single one down in City Hall is taking your dollar. But they intimidate people, and most people are afraid to be intimidated by these people. Yeah, terror. You go down there and the election supervisor will say, get out. But I'm saying right now, every election supervisor in this state who uses the print-o-matic has a license to steal. And you would think that butter wouldn't melt in their mouths when you talk to them, and they'll tell you they're crazy, and you don't have to look at this, and I can't show it to you. Why? If I show it to you, it means you could possibly rig this election. That's what they say, and that's garbage. And they won't let you see it. And I'd like people to send me that video and get a hold of me at Victoria House Press in New York City and tell me what you find, because this investigation is going on.
How can we contact you? I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of viewers tonight that would like to contact you.
They can contact me at Victoria House Press in New York City. It's in the phone book.
And what telephone number do you have?
212-809-9090. 809-9090. You can't miss. And if you forget, Victoria House Press, like Queen Victoria. And I'm an investigative reporter. I go around and I check it out, and I tell you on the phone where to look. And so I've had investigators all over the country call me and say, what should I do next? And I tell you what to do. And basically everything that the elections division has, you could ask for, every piece of paperwork, everybody they pay and how much they pay out, is available to the public and should never be hidden. And there's nothing about the vote count that should be secret. Only the secret ballot, not the count. And if they're trying to get the computer in here, Sequoia Pacific of Jamestown, New York owns the computer too, as well as the print-o-matic. So what they're trying to do is switch to the computer, and then it won't make any difference. The print-o-matic.
We have the print-o-matic, the lever machine in Connecticut.
Right, but you crank the handle and the piece of paper comes out.
The Secretary of State's office was telling me that they're old, they're outdated now, so they want to go to the computer.
The computer makes it real easy, and they can control it from their motel room. I really want to make that clear. They can control that computer from a modem. And we found bills in Titusville and all over the country, modems, that the private companies come in, and they can actually sit in a motel. One of the phenomena that people have seen across this country is, like, they don't have to rig an election if all their people are going to win. If they know it, nobody's running.
I mean, all their people are running.
Handpicked.
They own all the horses.
They own all the horses in the race. If a charismatic leader comes up and doesn't want to play the party game, like we did in Florida, and Susan Brenniker down there and various people, what they'll do is they'll let it run to see how you would have done. And if you're winning, and this is what people have seen across this country, probably in this state, the computer will break down, they'll tell you on television.
Yes, exactly.
And when it comes
and it breaks
back,
down, and then everything, what happens then?
when it comes back, only that one candidate is turned around. They say, oh, we're going to get whipped. And they turn it around, and that's it, and everybody goes to sleep. So, oh, well, you know, they didn't notice this little phenomena. Right. And yet, in every state, they've seen it, and
it happens too.
everywhere.
Yeah.
And the computer's broken down. We're not getting actual results. We're going to give you our projections. And then the last thing, I think we got a few minutes at my hands on the clock here to say, they control the exit polls. This is really important.
Oh, yeah.
CBS originally owned the exit polls, and they've now merged. It's called the Voter News Service. It's in the phone book in New York. It was NES, News Election. Now it's VNS. Voter News Service. You can get it in the phone book in New York. Robert Flaherty and I forgot the guy from CBS who controls the exit polls, but it's in there. Warren Matofsky. They own them, and so when we checked on the New Hampshire primary, the New York Times the next day after the primary will run a box saying everything was done on projections, so that at 7:01, how do you know who won? Nobody counted a vote. It's based on exit. People come out. We called every single election supervisor in the state of New Hampshire, and they said, well, first of all, people only vote here in the middle of February in below zero weather, in the morning quick before work, and at night quick before they go home. Every exit pollster has to be 300 feet from the poll. The numbers that the New York Times had been printing, and I suspect they're not going to do that anymore because I'm on to them, and so are people. Watch, they won't print it anymore. But you can go back and look at the numbers, and we printed it in the book. 4,000 people came out of the polls, walked 300 feet, and filled out questionnaires that said whether their income was 5,000, 10,000, over 80,000. One election supervisor said people who make over 80,000 in this state are probably non-existent, and mainly they wouldn't stand in line and give you a questionnaire for nothing. And then it says gay, Jewish, lesbian. They had all those numbers, how it was broken down, Catholic, unemployed, whatever. When you add up how many people, in the time it would take to do that, they'd have to be lined up every 5 minutes around the clock to fill out this lengthy questionnaire. Cold night fills up.
Physically impossible.
And they said nobody's ever seen them do it. It doesn't happen.
Yeah,
they never did it. And when we tried to find out how it was done, we were told this is not a proper area of inquiry in the United States. And you'll find that out, too, because you can call VNS. In New York, right now, ask for Robert Flaherty.
So basically they're saying we're doing something improper and we don't want you to know about it.
That's it. And that's the exit polls that Brokaw, Rather, and Jennings are going to come on at 7:01 and tell you who won the New Hampshire primary.
And they'll know right down to that last person.
And, and the vote won't change all night. I'm old enough to remember when the vote would swing. You'd wait for the farm vote, the outstate vote, the lower state vote, and it would go back and forth, and you'd root.
Sure.
Right.
It doesn't change all night because the numbers are fixed from the beginning to the end, and nothing changes across America.
What can we do? I know you have a petition in your book, Vote Scam, to Attorney Janet Reno. Right. The front of the book says, the book that indicts Attorney General Janet Reno. She had me arrested in pursuit of this. It's too late to tell you how, but it's in there. Janet and I have a meeting with Destiny, a rendezvous with Destiny somewhere along the line, unless she gets out of office before I get her. But if people really want to bring this country back to the Norman Rockwell days, which we can, to the days when things really were kinder and gentler, run by real people, not the lawyers who play ball out there in every community and are scared to death of the power brokers. So people want more information, and the number again is 212-809-9090. 9090.
Right, and I'm willing to speak. I'm willing to investigate, and if we can blow it out of the water and go back to paper ballots counted in the precincts, and they should be put in see-through plastic boxes so they can't use a box and stuff it and sit there and have election sciences in high schools and colleges and have everybody care about the vote. It will change this country overnight. But if you don't do it, it's going into the pits of greed that is beyond anything that will... the next 4 years that Revelation said so, for you people who've read the Bible, Revelation said the next 4 years are going to be terrible, and it can be stopped if people really care.
Mrs. Collier, what exactly, where do you think I have spoken to some state representatives and state senators and asked them to come on, and hoping that they're watching the show tonight, and I want them to come on and address these issues that to ensure the people that we do have...
You can't. None of them. They're all beneficiaries, and as long as they got the print-o-matic in this state,
well, how can,
you have to trust them.
What can the people do to
the people
ensure
can go to court.
Aren't stolen?
The people can go down with video cameras like flies. Hundreds of you should go to the elections division.
Yeah.
You shouldn't just sit home or turn this show off. You go down and force them, and when that hand is forced, you should go to the newspaper and say, look, we know you're part of it. You're part of it. You make a fortune every time there's an election. You control the power. The major newspapers, you're saying. Even the local ones.
Oh, the locals.
But the majors are. I mean, I'm sure the Hartford paper here and the...
I think people know a little bit about this, too, and I think it's just overwhelming. It's frightening, and, you know, the establishment has all this power. We need to take the people need to take the power back.
The establishment are just guys who put on their pants who would be scared to death if you come after them in numbers and say, we want our vote back. But if you get intimidated by an election supervisor who says, get out of here, and because you're the only one, and you don't have a video camera to record it and show your friends... That's why I wrote the book. I said, show it to people. Let them read the book. It doesn't change. The blueprint's in the book.
Well, it's certainly an explosive investigation. And tell us what's next after vote scam.
Is vote scam too. Is the shadow government, and it's what happened after the first book came out, and whether the people of this country fought back or not. So what we're doing tonight will be in the next book.
Well, I want to thank you, Mr. Collier, for coming on. It was a pleasure having you on, and the information. Once again, I'm hoping, do we have a number on the air that you can put on the screen?
Do they have
one more time if people didn't have their pens or pencils there?
But it's Victoria House Press.
Victoria House, okay.
That's for me. And we'll... Believe me, this fight will never end. People ask me 2 questions. Aren't you afraid of getting killed? And have you gone to 60 Minutes? And that's how I answered that. The answer is they've tried it, and it's in there. And Mike Wallace has had it. He interviewed me, and you'll be surprised. And when I gave him this book, he said, as far as I'm concerned with this book, Jim, I got permanent Alzheimer's.
Vote scam.
We have 30 seconds left.
Oh, well.
You can hear it in the distance. You can feel it in the air. You can tell the time is coming. You can sense it everywhere. You can see it in the faces. Revolution's coming, and the country's on the line. Will you be among the patriots? Will you stand among the brave? Will you heed the call? Give your all. Will you for the USA? About